3. So type 3 is called the motivator or the achiever. And I describe this is like the energizer bunny of the Enneagram. These are people whose attention is going out to what does it take to be successful? What does it take to achieve? So these are kind of the achieving machines. They set a goal, they're focused on the goal, they race to the goal as fast as they can, they achieve the goal. They get the award, they put it on their wall. They want to make sure that you see that award. They might be subtle about it, they might be less subtle. And then they're off to the next achievement, the next goal. So these are people who tend to be very, very goal-oriented, and they usually are pretty successful because when so much of your attention is going after kind of achieving these goals, you tend to be pretty good at it. These are people who are often highly, highly competitive. So some threes will admit, it is hard for me to let my children win a board game. I just constantly want to be winning. It's just in me. And they also kind of have a desire to be the best in whatever environment they're in. So sometimes it's in the foreground, sometimes it's in the background, but there is this kind of competitive drive that the personality can have. One of the things that they are really gifted at is inspiration and motivation. So they're spending a lot of time kind of being achieving machines, but they can also see that in other people. So this is someone who can sort of see what someone is capable of and can be very inspirational. A lot of the motivational speakers, you'll find that they are type 3s, and they're really good at it because they truly believe in you. They can see what you can do. They can lay that out for you. They can pump up your confidence, and they can kind of help you go forward to achieve your own goals. It's a gift of theirs. They're really, really good at it. This is a personality that often feels its identity from the outside in. So a lot of threes will say, it is hard for me internally to know how I'm doing without external clues. So this is often the person who will live in the right zip code, drive the right car, go to the right school, have the right job title, and they want to make sure you see that because they kind of get a sense of wellness when they see that you see that they've achieved. They're looking kind of for the outside world to assure them that they're doing well. This is somebody who can often have a hard time identifying themselves. So when I do Enneagram typing interviews, sometimes threes, it takes a few tries for them to realize they're a 3. And that's because the personality identifies around a role. And what I mean by that is, for example, I might go to a convent and I'm interviewing a bunch of nuns. And so you think, oh, the nuns, they're probably the helpful type 2s. But eventually I'll get to the nun who says, I want to pray the hardest. I want to convert the most people. I want to be the best nun. And that is actually a type 3. It's this drive to be the best. And it can be further confusing because it's a drive to be the best in whatever environment they're in. They've put themselves in or they've found themselves in. So for example, I have a friend who lives in Venice Beach, California, and he's a 3, but in Venice Beach, kind of the mark of being the best would be he's been unemployed the longest, he's got the best pot dealer, he kind of has lots of slacker friends. That's what the best would look like in that environment. So just to keep in mind, it's the best, but it's the best in whatever environment they're finding themselves in. So this is kind of like the overview of the type. The growth path. So how do type 3s relax their habit of attention? So if this is someone who has a habit of attention of wanting to be successful in the eyes of other people, what that often drives the personality to do is to shapeshift. So in the Enneagram, they call it fraud. I find that a little bit harsh, so I kind of think of it more as shapeshifting. But a type 3 might start to act like something they're not really at all because they're trying to be the best in whatever environment they're in. And this was really articulately spoken. I was at a training once where there was a very self-aware type 3. And the question was, how do you know you're a type 3? And he said, look, I am a white Caucasian guy who lives in a Hispanic neighborhood. And I went to my friend's party and I wanted to be the best Mexican at that party. And he's like, I know I'm not Mexican. I know I can't be the best. It's wrong, but I'm trying, and I'm trying to use their slang and I'm trying to dress the right way. And he said that was the moment when it was really clear to me. So it's kind of this shape shifting. It's kind of coming out of alignment with who they are to try to look good in the eyes of other people. When they drop that and they go to authenticity, that's the growth path. So you might hear it called going from fraud to authenticity. I call it shape-shifting to authenticity. It's the same path. And there's also a piece where threes are very driven to be in action. So they grow a lot when they become able to be still. And we'll talk about that. For a type 3, this stillness is really, really challenging. And in the meditation circles, they kind of laugh that when a type 3 is meditating, they're meditating, and then they jerk out of it and kind of race into action to the next thing. So even in the meditation world, while they can meditate, there's this thing like, okay, now it's over and now let's go off to the next thing. So again, it's just the personality is it's a very action-oriented type that's quite driven. So that's sort of the overview of what the general type is looking like. And we go through all of the facets of the Enneagram. So the next facet that I'm going to talk about is the center. So just as a refresher, there's the heart center, the head center, and the body center. Type 3s are in the heart center. So this means they first experience the world through the energy of emotion. When something happens, first they're having an emotional response. Whether they react to that or not is a different story, but that's how they're first experiencing things. And because they are part of the heart center, the sensitive issue that they have is shame. So shame gives them sort of this complicated sense of identity. They have a hard time accepting things that are within themselves. And the journey is really to self-acceptance. And kind of like I talked about with type 2, self-acceptance is not that you love every single aspect of your personality. It is that you accept every single piece of your personality. So what all of the type 2, 3s, and 4s have to really learn to do is to look at who they are very objectively and just be okay with it. It's not that they're going to necessarily like every element, but they can admit like, yes, this is who I am. That's just part of it. And I accept it. So this is, again, part of the journey for them to kind of learn to dissolve this shame. This is the type that represses shame. So in each of the centers, there's a type that overexpresses it, that underexpresses it, and represses it. The type 3s repress shame, and they do that by achieving and by staying kind of on the go. So this is part of why stillness can feel really anxiety provoking, because shame starts to come up and they don't like that feeling. So that can be part of what's going on. So that's the center. Just to keep in mind, type 3s are in the heart center. So then we talk about the, I call it facet number 3, the wings. So you are your type, but you are influenced by one of the numbers next to you. You continue to have the type 3 habit of attention, but now you've got the seasoning of one of the other types. So type 3s with a 2 wing, the word that they use is the charmer. This is somebody who tends to be pretty social, pretty warm, leaning forward, often extroverted. And this is someone who might be more open about seeking approval. There's a theory that Bill Clinton is a 3 with a 2 wing. And part of what's amazing is they can really connect. So charmer is exactly the right word, because this is somebody who's kind of looking at how can I be successful? How can I be achieving? But it feels very warm, and there can be a real connection that is possible with 2s with 3s who have this wing. So it's called the charmer. The 3 with the 4 wing is called the professional. So this is somebody who looks a little bit different. And if you see the 2 side by side, you'll notice kind of an energetic difference. This is someone who tends to be a little bit cooler, a little bit more introverted, sometimes more creative, just having a little bit more of an internal experience, and often more internally competitive. So this is someone who isn't leaning forward, asking for approval quite as much, but they're having that internal conversation about it. So this is someone who's maybe having a lot of internal, like, oh, I really want to be recognized. Why am I not being recognized? It can be happening on the inside, but it's not presented as much. You might not know it. So the professional is the 3 with the 4 wing. So those are the wings. We'll move to the subtypes. So as a refresher, there's 3 subtypes: the self-preservation subtype, the social subtype, and the sexual or intimate subtype. Think of the subtype as a pie of 100%. Most of us will have 50% or more of one of the subtypes. So we're leading with that subtype, but there's a stacking, and you may very well have pieces of all 3 within your personality. So the self-preservation 3, this is the counter type. This is the 3 that doesn't always look like a 3. And the word that they use is security. So this is the 3 who doesn't just want to be seen as the best. They want to actually be the best. This is the 3 who really wants to make sure they're delivering on the goods. So this tends to be someone who is extremely hardworking. It's somebody who's actually humble, who can be understated, who sort of thinks it's bad manners to brag. So they're not going to brag. They're not going to tell you all about their achievements. But if you talk to these 3s, they're secretly hoping that you'll notice, and they really do get a lot of pleasure and enjoyment and satisfaction when they're recognized for what they've achieved. So it's someone who's very, very driven, but going to hold it in a lot more, and who would not be happy with being recognized for something that they didn't think that they really deserved it for. So this is someone who tends to be very, very hardworking. The social 3, this is the word that they use is prestige. And when you read kind of the more generic Enneagram books, this is the one that they're talking about. So this is somebody who is a little bit more overt about sharing their successes. This is the person who's quickly going to tell you what school that they went to, what zip code they live in, maybe what their IQ is. They're sharing all of this information because it's very important for them that you see them as a success. They can brag, they like admiration, they can be socially brilliant. So these are people who just seem to dazzle. They really can have a charisma about them, and they can do very well in sales roles. They can do very well kind of in out there with the public. This is something that comes pretty easily for them. If you talk to them, what's often a surprise to the rest of us is behind the scenes, there's a little bit of a fear and anxiety that they're going to be found out, that maybe they've overpresented, and that maybe this whole thing is a house of cards that at any moment, the whole thing is going to collapse. So all of the 3s are going to be sensitive about issues around reputation, but the social 3 is going to be very, very sensitive about it. If something feels like a ding to their reputation, that can really throw them off. So that's the social subtype called prestige. And then finally, the sexual or intimate subtype, and again, this has nothing to do with sex, it's just a label that's used. The word that they use here is charisma. And this is a 3 that tends to be a little bit more shy, a little bit more reserved, a little bit sweeter, who doesn't necessarily want the attention themselves. They are really gifted at promoting other people. So they often have a cause or another person that they're promoting, and they're out there doing that. They want to be close to the cause. They want to be close to the other person. So there can be almost a merging that's going on, but they don't necessarily feel really comfortable in the spotlight themselves. And this is someone who instead takes all of that kind of drive to succeed and puts it on pushing the other person or the other organization or whatever it is to succeed. So that's what that can look like. They don't always love direct recognition, although they want to see their person or their project be successful. That is important to them. So those are kind of the 3 different subtypes that you'll see. Then we talk about what happens under stress or what happens in security. And again, we've kind of shifted our thinking. So the stress point is actually these days called the contraction point. And the idea is when we're all feeling contracted, we behave a little bit differently. So what does that look like for a type 3? When type 3s are stressed, when they're feeling contracted, when they've been in a pressurized environment, when they're not feeling well, they go to type 9. And this is a real surprise to the outside world because this is someone who's usually really driven. Like I said, the energizer bunny of the Enneagram suddenly becomes lethargic, suddenly becomes slothful, suddenly becomes depressed. It's someone who's laying on the couch, who can't get up, who can't focus, who can't go after their goals. So when 3s aren't feeling well, they go to type 9 and can kind of start to shut down. The opposite, what happens when they're feeling good, when they're feeling on top of the world, they've been nailing it, they feel like they can really kind of show up in an expansive space. They go to type 6. So this is also interesting because this is a type who usually is very, very competitive, kind of has a little bit of a me first attitude. They suddenly slow down their pace. They suddenly become team oriented. They suddenly become collaborative, and they start to think it's not enough that I win, we have to win. So they kind of can start to think about the whole team, the whole group, and that's what that can look like. So that's the type 3 when they're feeling more in an expansive state, also called the security point. And then finally, we talk about levels of awareness. So there are 9 levels of awareness that have been outlined in the Enneagram. You're not going to stay at one level, your whole life or even throughout the day. You're probably moving up and down. But of the 9, usually we're operating either at the highest level, in the middle level, or some place lower. The highest level, this is where I would say, if we all were operating at the highest level of our Enneagram type, it would be very difficult to recognize what type we were. You would not be acting out your habit of attention very much, and the world would be filled with compassion. All of the types at their highest level are deeply compassionate, including the type 3. So when they are very, very highly self-aware, when they have really relaxed the habit of attention and they are not feeling this drive to shape shift, to have you see them as a success, when they can show up differently, what do they look like? They show up very authentically, very self-accepting. They can talk about their flaws and weaknesses. Their image and their inner world are in alignment. They are not presenting something that isn't also going on the inside. They're humble, they're honest. And what the rest of us experience that's really beautiful is they can speak from the heart. So this is a heart type. And when they connect to their hearts, it's really beautiful. A lot of 3s are so busy in action that we don't see that very often. But when they start to reach those higher levels of awareness, they really can speak from the heart. And it's quite beautiful for the rest of us to experience. So that's kind of what it looks like at the highest level. Those are the top 3. The middle 3, this is kind of with when the defenses start to tighten, when you begin to move back into your habit of attention, when you're starting to act out type. What does that look like? Well, now the same person is starting to have anxiety that maybe they're not measuring up to where they feel they need to be. They become more competitive. They've got a deeper desire to be the best, a higher drive for that. They start to shape shift. So maybe they begin to act like things that are not actually happening in their inner world. Maybe they let you misunderstand how well they're doing. Maybe they kind of present in a more polished and positive way than they actually are. They need to look good, and the need to look good outstrips the need to be real. So suddenly looking good is kind of the thing, and looking real, that gets thrown to the side. They want to impress other people. So that's what's going on as the defenses are tightening. And if they really kind of fall into their fixation, they're completely acting out their habit of attention. What does this look like? This is somebody who becomes ruthlessly exploitative. So this is someone who's using other people. They can have a lack of empathy. They begin to feel envy, and they can feel it in a way where they want to bring other people down. So this drive to be competitive starts to be where you want something bad for other people because it makes you feel bad to see them doing well. So it becomes this kind of envy starts to manifest. You can start to feel sort of begrudging the success of other people. So you hear your coworker got a raise, got a promotion, and that makes you angry. That makes you upset, not because you didn't get it, but because they did get it. So it can be that. This can have deception, this can have lies, this can have just phoniness. This is someone who's just presenting something that's completely different than what's actually going on in reality and in their internal world. So that's kind of what it looks like when they're not doing well. Again, what we're always striving for is to have those higher levels of awareness and to be operating at the top level. And just to restate, if the whole world were acting at this high level, it would be a world of deep compassion. So that is what we're going for. So that's the overview.